Hi, this is Joe Wood, and I'm presenting my portfolio of best practices today for um, Fort Hays State Transition to Teaching Program, Class 803. Um, the portfolio overview for today will cover social emotional learning, project-based learning, individualized learning plans, and assessment. Um, and kind of the idea behind this is I'll kind of review what each one of those concepts are, kind of what I've learned through the program and through my first year of teaching, and then kind of how that's influenced and been put into practice in my classroom. So, social emotional learning, I pulled a good chunk of the information from our Kansas State Department of Education website, and a lot of it, as I indicated there at the bottom, was quoted. Um, so their definition or their explanation of social emotional growth is written on their website. It's a high priority for Kansans. The Kansas CAN vision for education, and the social emotional learning is one of the 5 measured outcomes that are really highly emphasized by the Kansas State Department of Education. Um, and so social emotional growth skills are geared towards intrapersonal and interpersonal abilities, of which some of these areas are self-awareness, social awareness, ability to problem solve, and decision making. And those are areas that State Department of Education wants to see us be more intentional about assessing and developing through the education system. So, in my classroom, a big piece of that is a big piece of this is through it's actually kind of the next topic, which is project-based learning. But one of the reasons why I've really developed an appreciation for project-based learning is, one, it's my personal preference. I really enjoy the process of project-based learning. I feel like it's a better representation of what you're faced with in adulthood, with problems that come to you, things that you need to learn, teach yourself, educate yourself, just like transition to teach, right? So if you think of this as a big project, as every day I've got to figure out, I've got a project, I've got a plan for my class and whatnot. And so I think project-based learning does a really good job of addressing a number of the social, emotional growth skills, right? Which it creates a problem to need to be solved, right? It creates the groups create an environment for social interaction that help develop social awareness. Also, in those groups, while you're developing that during that social interaction, you're also developing self-awareness as you figure out kind of where you fit as you pay attention. I feel like social awareness and self-awareness can definitely be developed hand in hand. Um, I think projects are a great way for decision making to happen through the process, and students to work together. So I think that project-based learning is a big piece, and project-based learning is another one of the areas that we're covering. And so based on Kansas State Department of Education, project-based learning is a student-centered instruction that helps students acquire a deeper knowledge through exploration of real-world challenges and problems. And one of the things that I've noticed, obviously I've only taught kind of during kind of the tail end post-COVID, but obviously student motivation, intrinsic motivation are all less, it seems like. And so I have found that in my classes, project-based learning has really helped. And a big piece of my project-based learning is also tied into another one, which is our personalized education process. But through project-based learning, I work with my students, and I kind of give them the standard, so to speak. This is what I want you to be able to learn from our next project. And then I let them be a part of the process of developing what the project is going to be, kind of some of what the parameters might be, how they want to present, or how the final, assessment of that project will take place, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a paper, whether it's some form of a advertisement video for a business. Obviously, as I'm a business instructor. And so I think the collaboration between students and teachers is really beneficial. learning occurs through the course of the project, not just after completion. And so I think that's one of the areas that for me I need to grow more as a teacher, in the sense that um, I need to have a few more checkpoints along the way. I would feel like um, there's what they call strategic. I've got it here in what I did in my classroom, but strategic observations, and I feel that that's kind of all I really did along the way, and kind of made sure assessing and making sure that people were moving along the right path and kind of along the right timeline. And I didn't necessarily. I feel like I want to be more intentional about an assessment along the way. So active style of learning through project-based learning rather than students just sitting there being with a teacher focused. It's more of a student focused learning. Students learn by working on a longer period of time to investigate, respond to problems, challenges, complex questions. And so in my classroom, I think I'll continue to implement longer term projects as I become more comfortable with the content. I like the idea and kind of what I ended up doing at the end of some of my classes, my entrepreneurship class, was we put together a business plan, and basically as they progressed through that process, it was kind of a teacher centered. I would kind of lecture and talk to them a little bit about a business model, a business plan, and then they had to go back and then take that information that they had just learned, research it a little bit more, Google and search other mission statements and things of that nature. And then they were able to use that into their own business plan that they were creating kind of simultaneously. So it allows students to work through problems to find their own solutions. And so they kind of hear from me a little bit, and then they're actually intrigued to ask more questions because of the project that they're working on. Helps them deliberate assessment points along the way. So that's one of the things that I need to do. I need to be more deliberate, like I said before, about creating assessment points. My thought is that, just have rough drafts, kind of do with this date. You need to have, to this point done with your rough draft, and et cetera. Those are some of the areas that I feel like might be fairly simple ways to implement that. And then, as I mentioned before, strategic observations. So individual learning plans, personalized learning, as defined by the Kansas State Department of Education, is instruction that's tailored to each student based on their strengths, needs, and interests. And so, again, one of the things that I found back up. So personalized learning commonalities, understanding each student's personal and academic background, their strengths and their needs, right? So maybe potential accommodations, or maybe potentially higher standards to a certain extent. Some students, I've encouraged to take what they've done in class and then go and present it to a business in town, or whatever it might be. Help each student develop ownership of their learning, right? And I think that's one of the things that I find is really difficult for some right now. And so that's an area of growth for me as well, is to really try to help get buy-in from all of my students, not just the ones that are more naturally intrinsically motivated. So provide students targeted instruction, practice. It supports them in areas that maybe they're struggling. It helps students communicate effectively. So I feel like trying to do personalized learning with my students, that it requires the students to communicate with me, and it helps them to learn how to learn. When I talk about what the standard is, or what the objective is for the day, and then we come back and circle back to it at the end of class and reflect on it. And did we actually learn that content, or how did we do during the day? And that was one of the things that I liked in I think one of our research, and I can't remember if it was for this class or maybe for 801, which I'm taking as well, but there was the fist to 5. So you kind of gave a rating. There's also the thumbs up, thumbs to the side, thumbs down. I feel like those are all ways that kind of go into the next section, which is assessment. But I feel like in my classroom I need to be more intentional about interviewing my students, and kind of giving them that quick one-on-one time to help build a profile, so to speak. I was actually thinking about this for my computer tech classes, and doing more of a quick pre-assessment. I think I submitted that assignment actually for 801 just this week for module 5 in that class. And I found an assessment that I really like, that I think will be our first assignment, first project in class. And I think that is kind of a way to personalize education through that initial assessment to gauge where everyone's at. So coordinate community connections in their area of interest, I feel like is definitely something that I know I can do. It's probably one of my strengths is community relationships, but at the same time, I was also hesitant to bite off more than I could chew last year as a first-year teacher. So assessment, we're actually in the process of redesign in our school district, and one of the big emphasis that we've been discussing kind of along with that subgroup is grading redesign. I'm on the portion of that that's more with community-based and developing community relations. But from an assessment standpoint, from Lumen Learning, it refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. And so I guess what kind of helps me in the assessment process is this idea, or is it an assessment for learning or an assessment of learning? And so I feel like that prior to teaching, I feel like it was more just an assessment of learning. What have they learned? Where are they at? Rather than an assessment for learning. And so one of the things that's really helped me through this class, honestly, is the assessment and the way we've been diving into it as a school district as well, is this whole idea of assessment versus evaluation, and kind of, evaluation being more that final end of the semester, judgment based on a summative work, whereas, I feel like assessment follows the line a little bit more with formative, in my mind, and I don't know if that's rightly or wrongly. But in my classroom, what I've learned and kind of what I've transitioned towards is a 60-40, with formative being about 40% of the class, summative being about 60% of the grade, rather than doing completion points or total points. Those are things that have kind of been removed from the business department to a certain extent. And then formative assessments, in my mind, in some of my classes, they need to be a little bit more frequent. The hard part for me as a business teacher is I'm teaching classes anywhere from accounting, which I feel like I've got a lot of formative assessments, and then computer tech, which has assessments built into it. It's a computer-based, web-based learning, so it's kind of already created, a little bit more of your factory style. And then I've got my entrepreneurship classes, which I let be a little bit more free-flowing, more project-based, which they kind of lack assessment, smaller assessment, more frequent assessments. So references, a lot of these, again, were references that were utilized by the Kansas State Department of Education. And so I've got a number of them for today's presentation. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to the remainder of our summer semester.